Welcome back. This is News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. Jazakallah so much for staying with us. Now, despite Women's Month being celebrated across the nation, gender disparities within South African workplaces persist. To illustrate, women earn around 20.1% less than men on an hourly basis and 32.5% less monthly. Additionally, a mere 42% of women held senior management roles, and only 39% of them are in a CEO positions. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa on Friday delivered the Women's Day speech in the Northern Cape, promising for there to be more equitable and more equal pay disparities within the workplaces, both in the public and the private sector. The question is, will that be happening, and what legislations need to occur for that to happen? Joining us now, I'd like to welcome the CEO of Africa, Hilary Leong. Hilary, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Thank you, Faraz. Thank you for having me on Hilaal TV.
It's an absolute pleasure. Hilary, I mean, it's 30 years into democracy. I mean, it's quite sad, isn't it, that we're still having these discussions with regards to equality within the pay measurement.
Yes, it is. I think it's the difficulty. One would expect that by now it would almost be a fragment of our memories in terms of inequality. But yes, with going from our past and having to fix is taking such a long time. And I think obviously it boils down to an individual or individuals, because anything that needs to be implemented or for anything to work boils down to a human being that has to implement it. So depending on who the human being is, or what their thought pattern is, or what they want to achieve, or their belief system, in terms of equality between male and female, that is going to determine quite a bit. Yes, our laws are there, and we're speaking about inequality, and it's trying to be addressed as best as possible. And I always say, irrespective, and the law has to be there, and the law has to be implemented. But then my question is, in implementing the law in that company, especially in your corporate sphere, yes, you have HR, you have labor laws which you can go to, but how much of that is filtering through when there is a problem where inequality is still so very existent within the workplace? And especially when it comes to, your salaries, like you spoke about, the earnings, the differences in earnings. I mean, these things in your HR policies is a confidential thing, quite rightly so. Well, for me, it is confidential in terms of my choice of confidentiality. That's what I think it should be. But companies expect you to have confidentiality with declaring what your salary is. So you don't quite know what your male counterpart or your colleague is earning, and you're probably on the same level, etc. To start off with, as you're going along, salaries will differ in terms of people's not just their progress, their performance. So maybe in a year's time or 2 years' time, you and I could start in a job at the very same position with the same qualifications, but I could be earning more than you, or you could be earning more than me as time goes on. But the problem is at the onset of employment. That is where your inequality is evident, because am I offered the same salary as that male colleague that has joined in the same for the same criteria, role, qualification, experience? Are they being offered the same salary as me? Is mine less? That's the question, and those are things we don't know.
Well, the stat speaks right over there, doesn't it, Hilary? 20.1% on an hourly basis, 32.5% monthly. I mean, that just shows that really, even 30 years into democracy, there really hasn't been a change of structure within the workplaces. And that's
Yeah.
just obviously not just private, but also in the public sector. Now,
Yes.
these speeches can be given, all of these lip service can be done, but if the implementation's not there, then those numbers are either going to decrease or it's going to remain stagnant.
100%, fully. That's why I'm saying a human being at the end of the day has to implement and make sure that that law, that act is put in motion so that it can be successful. But the recourse of that, how much of that is happening, which is clear according to stats, is not.
Hilary, then let's go to senior positions. So you've got 42% holding that, 39% only within CEO positions. Of course, you got the JSE CEO, who is a female, and there are other private firms that have CEOs, but the number is very little. Now, where does the conversation come in terms of allowing there to be a growth of female senior positions? Because you've said it's down to a human decision, but also there needs to be push from government to also allow for that to happen. There's only so much they can do, they would say that. So where do we get to a point where leadership amongst females in major corporates is really something that we're seeing and that we can have there sort of a 50-50 within their male counterparts?
Well, government can't say they can't do nothing because reports have to be provided. So your ratios, your BE reports that have to be handed in, for example, those are things that need to be given in. And reports can be manipulated. So I think once those reports are in government, physical checks have to be done in government. Look, you'll know, I mean, out there, who's the CEO? Pick up the phone call, who's your CEO of an organization, of a particular corporate, and you would know, and that's how you're going to check. And so it is quite evident, it's not like it's hidden, you know, that people can hide that kind of thing, or people in very senior positions in different organizations, you can't hide it. It's just a phone call away. But I think there's apathy in terms of doing those physical checks to find out if what's on paper that's being sent is really what is. And obviously what's on paper is revealing the stats. So what are we doing about it? It's no use talking about it and saying there's inequality. What tangibility are you putting in place to remedy the inequality? So if you have the law and your companies are meant to be complying, so what is your check and balance that you are doing to make sure that they are complying? And where you see it is non-compliant, what's the recourse? What are you as government then doing and saying to that company, you have not complied, you have X amount of days to comply, and if you do not comply, these are the repercussions or consequences of not then complying. And that is it. So again, implementation of that act, that law in its entirety.
Hilary, of course, legislations like BBBE are there to help enhance female representation, especially Black female representation, or females that have, of course, been, considered previously disadvantaged. Now, often you find firms, really not holding the BBBE to its standards. So what does government now need to do to say, okay, BBBE is there and there has to be an implementation? If there's not an implementation, then there has to be some sort of recourse with regards to that. I mean, can you see that happening? Is that something that government's really willing to take on in order for this to happen?
Look, obviously, when you do it, there's an act in place, there is a recourse measure that goes with it that government would employ. But the thing is, again, like you're saying, implementation. And I'm no longer in the corporate space, but when I was, you could see a manipulation of their BE policy to be in favor of whoever the employer is, what they want out of it. So, things like deliberately employing people who are not suitable for the job, even though it may be the color that is required to get your ratios right. But that is setting somebody up for failure, doing an injustice, disservice. So that's where also the problems come in with females. So then it's easy to say, we've complied and there's nobody else for the job. So you take the person, which then is what you would want in that position, and may not be female, may not be white, may not be black, or may not be colored, or whatever the ratio is where you're out of line. So now you need somebody. But the other thing is that person that you set up for failure 6 months, 3 months down the line leaves the job or is fired as a result of not being able to perform. And then the finger is pointed that it's not working. In the meanwhile, there's been a manipulation because the people have been employed deliberately knowing that they aren't going to perform in a particular job function. And that is happening. That does happen. And especially in the beginning, when employment equity, BEE, was just implemented, it definitely happened. People kicked up against it, etc. And obviously people now, I mean, they got used to BEE, and not that everybody agrees with BEE, people don't, but still they find ways and means around it. So that is also where there's also this, I don't want to use the word failure, but yeah, almost where a breakdown of what BEE is meant to have achieved. And those are things which needs to be looked at, so that to avoid, manipulation of the BEE, and ensuring that people who are employed in the job, in a particular job, is definitely suitable, while still fulfilling what needs to be filled and ensuring that your ratios are correct, but most importantly, that the scales are balanced, that there isn't an imbalance, whether it's black or whether it's white, but the scales need to be balanced. So in some cases, you can have in an employment where there's too much black and very little white, colored, and Indian, and there's also an imbalance. You have the others, and then you have the other way around as well, where they would deliberately bring in a black person or colored person or of color or female, like I said, knowing they're gonna fail, and then afterwards the scales tip the other way. So whichever way it should be in terms of the ratios of BE in order for balancing of the scales, that is what needs to happen, and not a manipulation that initially it looks fine and then it goes on and then there's a flip. And that's why we're staying with an imbalance all the time.
Hilary, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.